Hello. Hello, John. Hello, guys. How are you doing? Yeah, good. You've made it. It's good. So, welcome to APG Noisy Thinking. The topic du jour, as you know, is do we need target audiences anymore? And I guess come on through, grab drinks, make yourselves at home. I guess the background to this is there's been a couple of different things that have been going on professionally. So we've seen UK Brexit, we've sort of seen obviously the US elections, and obviously audiences and targeting has been quite a focus in both of those themes. We've sort of seen more of a conversation around personalised marketing and the assumption that that's both a possible thing and a preferential thing, maybe a false assumption. We've also sort of seen, I think, sort of beginnings of fragmentation around audiences and thinking about customer journeys and segmentations and personas and UX and experience design and all of that. So there's a number of different themes that are pulling on the idea of what an audience is and what a target is, and whether that's a good thing, and whether it's a big thing or a small thing or an attitudinal thing or some other thing. So we're going to start to unpick that, I think, this evening, and we're going to start to answer some questions like how relevant is the traditional creative brief? What about Cambridge Analytica and all their personalisation stuff? Is that a real thing of brilliance, or is it bullshit? What is and isn't useful nowadays? What do creatives need? What do they want? What do planners need and want? How much should you specify channel stuff up front, and why? And is it enough just to meticulously plan the customer journey, and where does audience stuff fit into that? So those are some of the things we might start to unpick. And we're also going to try and shape things up just a little bit. So up until now, we've been doing noisy thinking. This is going to be a bit more of a noisy doing session. So there's going to be a bit of a workshop theme. We've got 5 speakers, they're brilliant speakers, and we've given them 5 minutes each, no more than 5. So we've got Lucy Jameson, Frank Durden, Verra Budimlija, I'm sure I've pronounced that wrong, apologies, I knew I would do, Andy Davidson and Whalley. They're going to have 5 minutes each to say their piece. Then we're going to kind of break out, and I will try and do my best to moderate that and to give that some sort of order. And then we're going to come back and kind of go, okay, what are the themes? What have you guys taken out of the think piece and the conversations that you have as groups, and what can we do as the APG to start to build on that and take some of the implications and some of that thinking and take that into our professional work. So before we kick off, I want to say thank you very much to Flamingo, our sponsors, and also, as ever, thank you to the amazing Google for providing this great space, amazing audio-visual dynamite, and a brilliant stage to be able to and space to be able to do stuff with. So thank you very much, guys. And we're going to kick off with Andy Davidson. Now, he started off his career as a youth brand consultant, I guess back in the days of Vegas. Yeah, you wouldn't get away with that. Then went over to MTV, before then heading over to qual agency Flamingo. He's been there since 2012 and now the MD of Flamingo, and always a great provider of powerful insights. So show us what you've got.
Marvellous. Thanks very much. You can tell by how withered and old I am now that those youth insight days are long behind me. But going to be coming at this, there's lots to say about target audiences, and I guess I'm going to be coming at this a bit more from targeting for behaviour. I spend a lot of time with consumers. I spend a lot of time thinking about culture, and our clients increasingly are coming to us to help us understand, to help them understand how is it you can understand that person's behaviour and how can you influence that behaviour. And that's increasingly where our sort of questions about targeting are coming into play. So I've probably done about 50 projects over the last 15 years looking at what a target audience is, segmenting them, creating them, and actually they've been some of the best and worst projects I've ever done in my life. And I hope to shed a bit of light on kind of what's made them good, what I think has made them useful and powerful to help businesses grow, and actually some of the pitfalls I see that might be worth avoiding. I'll try to be provocative. So do we need target audiences anymore? This was a genuine target audience we had to recruit and understand on a brief that I received about 3 years ago. Now, I admire the sort of Byron Sharp-esque ambition of this. It's just get everyone who eats biscuits, get them to eat our biscuits. And I mean, this just sort of freaked us out a little bit, because the fundamental problem is, yes, you do want people, anyone that eats biscuits, to eat your biscuits, of course. But how do you do that? And you know, anyone that's spent any time looking at human behaviour here knows that to get a behaviour, to influence the behaviour you want, you need to be really specific. You need to understand the contextual factors. You need to understand, you know, who that person is. You understand the barriers to why they're not buying your biscuits at that moment. And until you've got that clarity and that real insightful, sort of incisive insight into why they're doing or not doing what you want them to do, you're a bit stuck. And you know, or you can just sort of shout a lot and talk about your biscuits, and maybe they'll buy some. But it's a bit of a haphazard and random way to start. This is backed up. This is a really good book that I highly recommend. It's called Hitmakers: The Science of Popularity by a chap called Derek Thompson. And I took this photograph, ripped this off of a chap called Richard Shotton from Manning Gottlieb. And I don't know if he's here. Ah, Richard, excellent. Thanks for this. I've got to say, if you're on Twitter, at r.shotton, follow this man. You'll never have to read a sort of business strategy management book again, because I think he's personally reading every single one of them and taking photographs of the best pages. So yeah, follow him. But the paradox of scale. In this book, they saw that actually some of the biggest hits, the biggest global successes possible, imaginable, were actually targeted for and designed for a particularly nuanced audience. So I'll just talk about this first one, Star Wars. This has been targeted for children of a magical age, old enough to appreciate movies and young enough to love medieval histrionics in space without irony or embarrassment. Now, if that was your target consumer, as you were sort of pitching this movie, you'd think, what on earth are these guys on? But, you know, guess what? It became the sort of massive franchise that we know today. And I think the reason why this works is that by being very specific about the creative target, who you've got in mind, you understand a lot about who this person is, what they might like, how they think, how they feel. Because there's one thing that humans have evolved to be very good at, and that's having a really good instinctive feeling for what other humans might like, if you know a bit about them. And I think there's probably quite a few people in this room that know this to be true, which is why other briefs that I've received over the last few years included creative targets like this: streetwear hounds, modern Epicureans, the creative class, principal progressives, or the colourful busy bees. Yeah, I gotta love a colourful busy bee. These are all different categories, different clients, obviously anonymised. My favourite was this one. Meet Carol, 42. She's got 2 kids and drinks Prosecco. Now, I personally do believe that a creative target is a tremendously important thing. I think it helps you write. I think, as we saw in that Hitmakers example, it helps you make something very human, very authentic, that other people know to be real. I think it also sends a very loud and clear signal out to other people you might want to buy your product, who you're for. You nail your colours to the mast. It's extremely important for people to know that Mercedes is aimed at a particular, you know, prestigious executive type person. But the big mistake that I see time and time again is when you confuse your creative target with your actual consumer target. You know, Mercedes would be crazy to think they were only selling cars to sort of prestigious executives, because they're not. They want everyone who possibly can scrabble together enough money to buy a Mercedes to buy one. And actually, if they were thinking about the process through which you'd influence those people to buy those cars, you'd realise you need to understand a bit more about them than perhaps just the creative target that you were aiming for. The second issue, and final one I want to talk about, is the issue I see a lot of clients running into when they try to define a target. Now, I'm going to try to do this using the visual metaphor of a flock of starlings. This seemed like a good idea at the time when I thought of it. Let's see if it works. So, client came to us. They said, we want to understand users of our video on demand platform. Tell us who they are, segment them. We want to understand how we can sort of influence them. Well, as we sort of pointed out, actually, if you look at these are TV or video consumers flocking around. Sometimes they're on YouTube. Sometimes they're watching linear television. Sometimes they come to your video on demand platform. But they're the same person doing all these different things. Okay, and actually, if you want to understand how to influence the behaviour of the person on your video on demand platform, it's really helpful to kind of understand all the other places they go, what drives them into your narrow window, your target of your little platform of video on demand. Because actually, if you get too close, you know, if your target is based on your category or your brand and you're too close in, this is a very confusing world. You're not going to be able to make much sense of your customers that are coming into and out of your little narrow target window that you've placed on your thinking. And so what I'd really urge you to do is take that step back, that sort of initial sense of what's driving this consumer behaviour and movement across all the different contexts and areas that you need, because that will give you a much clearer understanding of what they're doing, thinking when they come into your target and your world, and where they might be going as well. The final thought I will leave you with is, if this stops playing, if in doubt, and you want to come up with a consumer target, and you're targeting for behaviour, just always think about propensity. How likely is it that someone's going to do the thing that you want them to do? How likely is it that they're going to buy your biscuits, or you're going to be in it with any chance of influencing that behaviour or that purchase of your biscuits or your car or your video on demand platform? And if you can bring in all the contextual factors you're going to need to understand what makes someone have a high propensity to do that, I think you shouldn't go too far wrong. That's what I think. There are 4 more opinions, so thank you for listening. I hope it was interesting.
Great, thanks very much, Andy. So I think there's a couple of interesting themes there about being really specific, about reading books called hit makers, about having lovely videos about starlings and not getting too close in, and about following propensities. All good themes. So I'd urge you to think about those, because when we do the breakout and do the workshop, you will be needing to kind of distill what the interesting things that you've heard from this evening. So as we go along, do kind of jot stuff down and keep it in mind. So next up is Frank Durden, who started off, I think, as an account man at DMB&B, and then Simons Palmer, and then WCRS, but don't hold that against him. He then went to the dark side at O&M as a global planning director, and now even darker side as a CMO at Benetton Hubble Group. So, come on up.
Thank you very much. So, yes, what Dom had mentioned is that my background, I've got 18 years working in agencies, and I've got 18 months as being a client. So 10 times as much agency experience and agency propensity to client. And what I would say is that even though when I went to the client side, the dark side, that they were really interested in getting an agency person involved in the company, actually it has made me reevaluate a lot of things that I took for granted when I was on the agency side of things. So the first thing is this is about target audiences, and every campaign I've been fortunate enough to work on has always had a really clear understanding of who it's aimed at, what they think, what they feel, what they do. So whether Nike or working with Dove or working on the launch of 118, a really clear picture of who you are and who you're talking to and what they're thinking is absolutely vital. And in fact, any successful campaign, I'd argue, starts with a clear understanding of your audience. So this is the point of view I took to my new employers about 18 months ago. And I said it's all about target audiences. And I was met with either blank faces or they just walked out the room. They couldn't really give a shit about the phrase target audience. And aside from phoning up Ogilvy and saying, perhaps could I come back, I then thought, well, I've got to find a new language to use on the client side. And what clients care a lot about is this phrase here, the addressable market. So clients are looking at a number. How many people can we actually sell our products to? So we were just talking about Mercedes. Ultimately, there is going to be a limit to the number of people that could ever afford to buy a Mercedes. You want to know what that limit is. And really understand the nature of what this addressable market is. And this, to me, highlights one of the differences between how agencies think and how clients think. Because great audiences, as we've heard and seen, are often described in quite qualitative terms. Really understanding what makes people tick, get under their skin. What are the insights that we understand and know about these people? But if you're on the client side, that's fine, but you don't really talk in qualitative terms. What matters most to you is quantitative data. How many of them are there? How much money have they got? How many of them are going to go and buy your product or your service? Now, I would say that this highlights another difference between what agencies can do well and what clients actually want to hear. So agencies often talk in general terms. They might think this. They're interested in that. They feel this, which is all fascinating and great from a creative brief point of view. But actually, if you're running a business, generalities are really bad. We might make some money. We might cut our costs. We might have to move our building. What clients want is precision. You need to know exactly what you're going to sell and exactly what it's going to cost you to do that. So I work for a consumer electronics company, and when we sell stuff, not everyone likes what we sell, and we get some people hand them back. Actually, our return rate is about 10%, and that's about average for the sector. To put it into context, if our return rate goes up to 13%, we don't make any money anymore. The difference between 10 and 13% is the difference for us between life and death. So they might not like it is a really bad thing to hear. What we want to know is how many of them are not going to like it. So what we value and what clients value is a degree of certainty. Now, what we've heard and what we've seen over the last year, 2 years, 5 years is that we're actually operating in a less and less certain world. So we've got this paradox between what companies want is certainty and actually what's going on around us is more and more uncertain. But at least to give us an idea of the probability that people are going to think something, and more importantly, that people are going to do something. Because as accountants, you can factor that in. If somebody is 50% likely to go and do something, then take 50% of the revenue, or even 40% of the revenue in your forecasts. That's how you run a business. And that's what clients, your clients, are thinking about when they're listening to your creative proposals. What we as agency folk, and I'm going to refer to us as agency folk in this room, love to think about is possibility. What people might do, what people might think, what people might feel. That's what gets us excited. You know, we've all been into pitch presentations where we talk about what if this and what if that. If you walk into the boardroom, what if will quickly get you shown to the door. What you need to work on is how you can get people back towards certainty. So I was kind of thinking about this, and I was thinking, well, you know, I still like the idea of possibility, and I still like the idea of understanding audiences in that qualitative world. So how might, in the future, agencies and clients cooperate in this thorny area of target audiences? So what agencies are really good at, I feel, and what they still need to be good at, even in this era of micro-targeting, is really understanding who these people are, describing them in such qualitative, colourful language, some of which we just heard. Colourful busy bees, for example. Now, what clients want to know, and what they want to have that translated into pretty quickly, is how many of them are there. Now, you should be able to do that pretty easily. There are more and more quantitative tools and analytic tools out there that allow us to do this sort of thing all the time. Because that's what they want to hear. And critically, what they want to hear is that how many of them are we going to convert? Or at least how many of them could we convert? Because that's the kind of language that it really appeals to us as clients on the dark side. And then, of course, it comes back to you. It comes back to the agencies, because agencies are expert in understanding as to how to get that conversion. Where I think clients, or agencies rather, get it wrong is they become so obsessed with the left-hand side of this slide that they forget that actually they're operating on behalf of clients whose business is based on certainty and quantitative data. So if we're thinking about audiences in this new world, that's how I feel that agencies and clients can cooperate better together. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Thanks so much, Frank. So, do we need target audiences? Yes, but perhaps not in the way we thought. So we need to perhaps sort of be precise. We need to be certain. We need to work out how many of them there are and how valuable they are. So that's a different kind of just way of framing it. So next up is Verra Budimlija, who has been at M&C, Saatchi, Leo Burnett, Sapient Nitro. She went to M&C in 2010, the Campaign Media Agency of the Year 2016, but now CSO. And more importantly, impressively, recently named one of the UK's top 3 media strategists and campaign.
Not true, obviously.
All yours.
Thank you. I don't know if anyone went to the IPA lunch today to hear Sarah Gold's inaugural talk, where she wants to take the IPA in the industry, which I think is a really fascinating step forward in terms of our evolution as a industry. And she talks a lot about the magic and the machine. And I think there's something really exciting about our industry right now, which we'll touch on which I'll touch on when I go through this. But this kind of idea of evolution is fascinating. I mean, we've gone from the world being flat to round, obviously. But in terms of marketing, for a long time we talked about pushing consumers through a funnel, going from consideration to purchase. But we now know that actually it's quite different, and we're not pushing consumers through a funnel at all. We're actually thinking about customers through purchase journeys, and those purchase journeys are on a continuum. So if you're in the passive stage, which is what I call the passive stage, which is where consumers are actually not buying the product, they don't need anything at that point in time from the brand, but that's not to say that they're not constantly forming opinions about brands in the categories that they're interested in. There's the trigger, obviously, that propels you into the market. That could be you've run out of toothpaste, or it could be that you've got 3 kids now and you need a new car. It could be any of those things. And then obviously there's the active stage where people are actually in market and they're looking to buy. And these stages could be anything from 5 years for a car, or it could be 3 or 4 weeks for a toothpaste brand. So, and it's really important that we start to think about these journeys, because the way that we think about target audiences would differ along those journeys. So, do we need a target audience? Well, I would say yes and no. And that depends where you are in the journey. So, in the passive stage, when you're trying to connect with consumers, but they're not buying. There's one approach, and in the active stage where people are in market and you need to reach them quickly and efficiently, there's probably a different approach. So passive first. Again, as I said, this could be 5 years if you're a car brand. People are in the passive stage. They're not thinking about buying a new car, but that doesn't mean to say that we shouldn't be connecting with them. And it's there when we talk about connections, what we're really meaning here is understanding their kind of motivations, their needs, their, what being part of, and there's a lot of talk about making sure that we're part of culture, brands are part of culture, and that is definitely the case, and what we need to do when we're in the passive stage of the journey. And just a couple of these are just media examples, but whether you're a brand such as Nivea and they're now associated with, and they have a kind of partnership with X Factor, they're the behind the scenes partner, so all their stylists are using Nivea products, but that's not the point. The point is that they're connecting with their audiences on a very broad level. As Colgate have done very recently, they've created 2-minute towels for children, because the insight here is that although children are brushing teeth more regularly than ever before, there is more tooth decay in this country than ever before, and that is because they're not brushing for long enough. So this is just an idea around 2-minute towels to keep kids brushing for 2 whole minutes. Again, these kids and mothers are not necessarily in market thinking of wanting to buy toothpaste right now, that minute. And this is just about brands trying to connect in the passive stage of the journey. But there's a real difference when it comes to the active stage. So this is how do we spot people in market? And that's different because that's just about behavioural signals, really understanding where these people are right at that point of time. So for instance, if you're nationwide and you're trying to sell mortgages, what are the signals that people who are in market, what are the signals? Well, the signals are that they're probably on sites looking at houses for a start. So you fish where the fish are. So you go to Rightmove and you start to kind of be around those sites that, particularly online, but not necessarily exclusively, where you know that those people are at that point in time. And that again that requires insight and understanding of your audience. But it is picking up on behavioural signals as opposed to a broader more qualitative approach to target audiences. Home serve is another example here where if home emergency cover is quite hard to sell, and it's quite hard to find people who are in market. But quite cleverly, HomeServe discovered that those people, just before they buy emergency home cover, they quite often will do things like go onto eBay and buy a radiator key because their heating is packed up. And if you see that as a signal that they are suddenly going to probably think, if my boiler's about to pack up, I better buy some home emergency cover. That's quite a smart behavioural signal to be picking up on. So I would say yes and no is my approach. So in the passive stage, a very broad but qualitative, deeper understanding, because you want to connect with people on an emotional level and build a relationship, is very different to picking up on behavioural signals in the active stage. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Vera. So a brilliantly definitive answer there. Yes and no. Of course. Great planner. But some interesting stuff there. I think maybe thinking less about audience and thinking maybe more about the journey, in particular more about the signals and what are those signals and what are the most relevant ones for you in a particular moment. Next up is Will Whalley, who starts off at Cambridge University. We did archaeology and anthropology, destiny to planning already assured right there. Went to Sparkler to become a strategy consultant, then moved to AMV, became a brilliant planner, won APG and IPA awards, and now onto Google, where he's a brand planner. All yours, Will.
Thank you. Thanks, Dom. I wasn't expecting that introduction. Yeah, I am the Google guy, for good or ill. And I want to give you a bit of a kind of a Google perspective on this debate, because I think it is a sort of a very interesting live debate. And I suppose for a lot of people, Google means data, and data mean target audiences in some way, shape or form. And perhaps that's because digital for a long time has been a kind of a byword for narrowcast or the targeted, and the more narrow as opposed to the broadcast, which you might have got through other media like telly or outdoor or whatever. And you might think Google are very vested in target audiences, and you'd be right, because there's certainly a lot of our clients who still really want them, and particularly more kind of performance or direct clients are really keen on trying to define exactly who those targets are and reach them in lots of different interesting ways. And I won't bore you with all the different sorts of targeting Google offers. If you want to find out, you can do that very easily. And I'm not that guy, because I frankly don't really know about all of them. But what I wanted to talk to you about was more of a kind of a more interesting development, which I think has come about in the last year or two, where people are starting to come to us, perhaps more kind of brand clients in particular, and wanting something rather different. Let's click on. And the thing, I think this kind of goes back to Frank's point about addressable audience. Byron Sharp, that name again, he talks about a shift from target audiences towards all category buyers. So rather than trying to chop your audience up in lots of ways and reach them, spend all your time trying to concentrate on a small group and trying to get them to do something perhaps that they're already doing already and do it even more. He talks about the importance of low loyals, or what you might describe as all category buyers, or the largest addressable audience. And increasingly, when we speak to brand clients, that's what they're asking for, because they've read Byron Sharp and they want us to do that. And actually, if we're going to sell some of our more brand-orientated products, so YouTube in particular being a video platform, something that we try and pitch at brand advertisers, we need to make a case for that being a good way of reaching all category buyers. And to do that, we sort of use the same technology in a different way. So if you like, I mean, target audiences, I suppose, it's a noun, as opposed to targeting, which is a verb or a sort of a technology which allows you to create a target audience. And certainly in the past, what we did was we enabled clients, and for those clients that still want it, we still do, we enabled them to target a specific audience through that targeting technology. But actually, what we're doing now when it comes to looking for that all category buyers are actually to think about who are all your category buyers. Because in the past, you've probably defined them through the kind of ways you might be able to do on a TV buy, maybe demographically or whatever. But the benefit of targeting and the kind of signals and the kind of things that Verra was talking about is that you can use targeting, that technology, to actually go bigger rather than smaller. So it sounds like a contradiction in terms, but if you use the technology in the right way, you can find all your category buyers, and you might find them outside the boundaries of who it was that you thought about. So Andy was talking about those very particular sorts of, I can't remember your kind of, the very particular sort of segmentation names. I mean, I remember when I worked in a qual agency, we used to spend ages trying to come up with the right names for the people in the segmentation. But there may be people that fall outside those boundaries that are still in market or will soon be in market for your product. And are your category buyers. So those are sort of represented by those sort of dim outside outliers. So you can use that targeting technology to find people above and beyond the people you anticipated. So I think, Dom, to save you the trouble, I put the key takeaways on a slide. But the thing I'd say is, firstly, don't presume everyone wants a target audience. Some clients do, but increasingly, particularly on the brand side, they're sold on this Byron Sharp-driven idea of all category buyers or the largest addressable audience. Don't presume that targeting only takes you in one direction. You can use it to go bigger rather than smaller. It can be a tool for finding those customers you didn't realise that you wanted or didn't know about. And I think what's interesting from our perspective is that that's starting to develop the kind of the pitch for digital as being less about that very narrow performance sort of pitch that it was maybe 5 years ago, and thinking of it more as a complement or even a better version of broadcast advertising that enables you to deliver that big reach that you might want if you're a Byron Sharpite, but do it in a more intelligent, more efficient way. That's it. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Will. So I gave you an introduction you didn't know you needed, and you've given me the takeout I didn't know I needed. So I think that's all fair, isn't it? Yeah, fair. Right. But go big is an interesting thing. Good to see you, Mr. Byron Sharp, making an appearance here this evening. Last but not least is Lucy Jameson, someone that hardly needs an introduction at all. Has been a top planner in campaign for forever, really. Started her career at, I guess it was BMP back in the day, then DDB, now Adam and Eve DDB. Created some of the boldest strategies out there, including Marmite, Love It or Hate It. Went over to Grey, became the CSO, then CEO, and is now busy setting up one of the hottest hot shops in the world, hopefully. All yours, Lucy.
Thank you. So I guess I've spent a kind of nearly a year in the wilderness, not being allowed to really work by my WPP non-compete. But what's been interesting about that time is it's meant I've spent a whole load of time working with people I couldn't normally work with, and pretty much all of them really startups. And the thing that they are all obsessed with is absolutely performance marketing. It is the narrowest targeting you can find, the least waste you can find, the highest efficiency, and the micro target. Absolutely, that's all they really care about. And who's going to blame them? They are looking for the people who are in market, and they're small and they need to make every penny count. The problem is that I think where that can lead you to is endless retargeting and fishing in an ever smaller group of people who have already engaged with your brand, and that tends to be the way it goes. So I want to paint an alternative picture today, and actually I think you should go wide, and I think you should think about how you embrace rather than eliminate waste. So I am not really a big fan of the kind of tight targeting at all. You know, we've heard about Byron Sharp. I totally buy that. I think there is loads of evidence that shows that to get growth, you've got to increase penetration. The lovely Les Binet as well makes it very, very clear that actually if you go after new potential customers rather than just existing customers, you are going to have a bigger business and profit effect. So the first thing I would say is that waste works. It's a good thing. And I think there are loads of reasons why. And we come back to Marmite, one of my favourite brands of all time. And I think part of the reason is that brands are not built when you are in market for that sector. A lot of brands are built over a lifetime. It might be 5 years for cars. In the cases of something like Marmite, it's actually generations. You pass that down from mother to daughter, or you know, father to son. So we have to think about a broader audience. You have to think about the biggest audience you possibly can to make your brand grow. And I think one of the things I'd also say is that I am still not convinced that we are yet in a world where we can predict, an algorithm can predict what I want to buy. And actually, I love the fact that I will randomly go and discover brands, or that if I feel like being somebody else tomorrow, I can be somebody else tomorrow. And if we eliminate waste and we go narrowcast, then we eliminate serendipity. And what a boring world that would be. I think it's interesting that it's Jeff Bezos who actually agreed there'd always be serendipity involved in discovery. And that's what we need for big brands. We need new people to discover them. Another reason I think is that waste is not talked about that much, but actually we're a social group and we've all evolved to copy. There are massive good reasons why copying is a fantastic shortcut. I mean, why bother to figure out for yourself how you create fire when you can copy the bloke with 2 sticks over there? There's a reason that we use shortcuts, we copy other people. It's because it's generally a pretty effective strategy. So what we really need to do is go after as many people as possible and then get as many people as possible to copy them. There's great experiments by Stanley Milgram, who's the guy who, you know, plugged people in and got them to give everyone electric shocks. But he also did an experiment in the 70s in New York where he just got people to stand around, loiter on the pavement and look up at a nearby building. Then he observed what happened with passers-by. No great surprises. The more people were standing looking up, the more other people copied them. So there is a kind of, you know, the bigger the group doing that, the more people will also copy. So I think waste is really important. You need to get as many people as possible, and then you'll get people copying it. And if you can, think about how you make your brand really visible. This is going back some time, but I thought this was brilliant. Everyone started seeing everyone wearing white headphones. White headphones didn't exist pre-iPods, and suddenly it was like, fuck, I want to be one of the people wearing white headphones. And there's another reason. It's not just that we've evolved with things like mirror neurons and Gandhi neurons to copy other people. It comes from out of our evolution. In the whole history of humanity, more people have been killed by other humans than have been killed by predators. So one of the best evolutionary strategies you can have is to identify very fast who is in your tribe and who is in an enemy tribe. And, you know, that absolutely is at the heart of what brands are today. We use them to identify who's in our tribe and who's not in our tribe really fast. My husband can do it with trainers. I can do it with clan gun tartan on a Scottish sloan at 1,000,000 miles. So, you know, I think that is one of the things that we actually love buying into brands, and we need those shared reference points. Otherwise, we can't do that and it doesn't work. And one of the things I think is really interesting as well is that a lot of why we buy is for the extrinsic reaction we get. Even if I can't afford a BMW, I want everyone to know that it's an amazing car and it's fucking expensive, because I'm going to feel good when they go, wow, you've got a BMW. That doesn't work unless the advertising's targeted them, even though they may never be able to afford one. I think you need that surround sound. And if we go narrowcast, we don't get that. So there are 5 reasons in my 5 minutes I think waste is really good. It's clear that it works from the data point of view. I think it's really clear that actually we need to target people out of market over generations, not just in market. We need to actually create that sense of serendipity and actually allow people to discover new stuff. We need to get people copying our brand, so we need to think about how you can get the biggest number of people that the biggest number of people will copy, and how can you actually make sure that your brand gives somebody a tribal identity. And again, that has to be a shared thing. And I'm going to leave you with one last slide, which is the alternative spectre. And I think this is kind of absolutely lays for me out so clearly the problem of micro-targeting. And I don't really need to say anything more apart from show it. There we go. So, thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Lucy. So, embrace waste, a brilliant slogan if ever there was one, and full bonus points as well for introducing Stanley Milgram experiments into APG. Very good. Right. So, this is where it hopefully goes over to you guys. Okay, we're going to try and get interactive. This is an experiment. Genuinely. It may work, it may not, I don't know. But let's try it together. So you will find under your seats, well, not under every seat, but under a lot of seats, there's a little sort of ticket thing. What I would like you to do, I'm going to give you about 12 minutes or so. So for each row, so guys, listen up. It's hard enough to moderate this when there's 150 people in the room. Right, each row should get together roughly in groups of 5. Okay, I'm appreciative that you are in a group of 3. I get that, but pretend you're 5. Split up into groups. All I want you to do is understand, just debate amongst yourself. What are the top 5 things that you've really taken out? What are the things that just kind of strike you as interesting things that you think, I hadn't thought of that, or that's really interesting. That's just, I did know that, and it's bloody critical. It's reinforced my belief in it. And then one thing about what are you going to do when you get back to your agency? What's the one thing you might do slightly differently as a result of this evening? Just one thing. So on that bit of paper, so to talk amongst yourselves in your groups, in your groups, on that bit of paper, your top 5 things and the thing that you think, as a group, you think you might do differently. What's the most valuable thing you can do differently when you go back to the agency? So is that clear? Okay, you have 12 minutes, so we're going to come back at 37 minutes past. And then you're going to tell me what it is. Okay. So guys, you've got exactly 5 minutes left. 5 minutes left, and there's a clock counting down how long you've got left, and it says 4 minutes 52. Keep going. Okay. So, guys. Okay, so the official time is now up. OMFG. So this is where a room full of introverts have to start to embrace their extrovert side. Are you ready for that? So what we're going to do now, how was that, just out of interest? Do you find that okay? Okay. Do you all know each other, or did you find new people? A bit of new people? A bit of a love-in? Yeah, it's good. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We are going, because obviously there's a lot of you, right? And if we got all of you up here, it would take all night, and then the whole thing would break down. Bad. So instead, what we're going to do is I'm going to pick 2 people at random, and I want one representative from each of the 2 groups I pick at random to come up here and just talk us through what's on your sheet. I'm just interested. And there is a microphone. And you shall embrace the room and embrace the love in the room. So what I would like is one person from each of the groups that you're in to put up their hand so I can at least see where the kind of group delineation is. Come on, come on, come on. It's not so bad. You know you want it. Okay, now. Okay, right, you were first, so you get the dubious pleasure of coming up first. Come on, come on. Now bring the bit of paper. Have you got the bit of paper? Have you got your bit of paper?
I improvise.
You improvise. Okay.
I'm kidding. We don't have a paper.
Okay. Speak to the world.
All right. So we weren't really able to nail down exactly what we were talking about, but because we got carried away. Anyway, I think that one of the things that we thought that one of the things that kind of is important that wasn't necessarily really brought up was context. Meaning that, yes, it's important that, in certain cases, there is some smaller businesses that have smaller audiences, bigger businesses that have bigger audiences to go after and different needs. So, in short, I think it was interesting to, we really liked the concept that you brought up, forget your name, I'm sorry, but Lucy. No, there was a concept of essentially go after go after as many people as you can, so that as many people as that there are there can copy them, because that's essentially the mechanism that happens. However, within that, we thought that it was really important to understand, rather than going after a lot of people, maybe going after what's common among all those people, because it's at the end of the day, it's after that common thread that people will copy after each other and adopt each other's mechanisms. So I guess that was the biggest takeaway for us.
What's your name?
Carolina. And I work at Flamingo.
Okay, Carolina, big hand for her. Thank you. Okay, so put up your hands again. Come on, don't be shy, don't be shy, don't be shy. You have the power. You have a bit of paper, I can see it. Come on up. What's your name?
Anna.
Okay, Anna.
So we also got slightly carried away, but we've written some points. The first point was that essentially it's all murky and you can't really decide whether you should target or not target. So, just all have a beer. Then we were kind of discussing the difference between creative versus data targeting and how those flex, and what weight do you put on either type of targeting. Ultimately, it kind of got down to, at the end of the day, clients do want precision, and really, what will win us the brief? Should we talk about targeting or should we not? And then we were talking, Lucy, about your points about embracing wastage, leading to sort of culture moments is really, really exciting and really interesting around short-termism versus longevity, and kind of what brands are and what brands could be, and subconscious brand love. But at the end of the day, the way culture seems to be right now is that it's all about short-termism. So sadly, maybe we can't embrace wastage. In terms of what we want to take away, how can we define what our brand's legacy is going to be in terms of brands lasting through culture and through the generations? What will that legacy be, and how can we work towards that now? Maybe we should see targeting as a blend of efficiency and precision versus that kind of broader scale Sharpian kind of logic. Digital as broadcasting and this kind of like platform that everyone can access is really exciting. So I think we're going to kind of go away and think about that. And then long-term behaviour change, maybe that's how we embrace waste and we look towards being behaviourally changing. I've ended that on a really badly constructed sentence, so I'm just going to go now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Anna. Amazing. You guys are good. I'm loving embracing that extrovert side. Okay, come on, hands up. Come on. Come on. Come on. Okay, I haven't had anyone right from the back. Come on. It's a long journey. Made for pilgrimage. What's your name? Max. Hello, Max.
Hello. Hello, everyone. I'm Max from Karmarama. We got 4, sorry. We didn't get the full 5. So the first one was thinking about the thought of kind of advertising, creating a brand, a kind of view of a brand for everyone. So obviously, you know, with BMW, the example that was made about BMW, everyone kind of understands that to be a premium brand, and that's why it's enjoyable to own a BMW car. That's kind of part of the pleasure of it. So is there something in thinking about how a non-user of that brand, i.e. someone that doesn't own a BMW, feels about the brand, and then injecting that thinking into the creative brief? So that was kind of a first thought. We're really interested by the idea of a passive audience being important, so kind of the argument for wide targeting. The other card, we've got, I personally thought the distinction between almost 2 types of audience, one which is more client-friendly and kind of women aged 18 to 35 for Diet Coke, and the kind of audience that creates great creative work, i.e. the one that was outlined for Star Wars. So the really very particular one which doesn't describe your buyer, but which gets you to create great creative work. So it's very important to have that distinction. I think I'm definitely going to keep that in mind moving forward. The fourth one was about there being kind of the difference between the actual size of the target audience and the target audience, and that, you know, you're needing to kind of get quickly to the size of the opportunity and including that in your proposal to a client and in your thinking and strategy to a client, because actually they're going to have to sell it to their stakeholders and, you know, kind of put their neck on the line for your ideas. So it's super important, right? And that's all 4.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Max. Now, I wasn't going to do this, but I'm conscious I've had a subconscious bias to the left side of a room, so surely I need to just even it out a little bit of one more over to the right hand side. Now, panel, I'm hoping you're sort of you're not coming up just yet, but I'm hoping your ears are open and listening to all of the juices that are flowing up here, because I'm going to ask you some stuff about this in a minute. Just warning you. So, okay, come on, one more time, hands up this side of a room, please. Come on, I need a group. I'm trying hard here, guys. Come, there are no hands. Where? Okay, come on. So, what is your name? I feel very awkward doing this, by the way. What is your name? What's your name?
Ed.
Ed.
Hello. Talked about lots of different things. Thought it was really interesting about when a buyer is who the buyers are and who the consumers are. I think it started off with I think the first question was about the consumers of all biscuits, but those aren't the buyers of all biscuits, and how that should change. Or the kids' toothpaste, actually they're not doing the buying, so how should we think about that? And how that should maybe kind of recalibrate wastage, I think. But kind of, is it wasted and how you should measure that. So actually maybe we need a new business case metric. Do a lot of times writing kind of business cases, but that always comes back to the kind of sales metrics. But actually if there's a more engagement metric that we should be looking at that isn't just likes and shares and everything else. Different routes to serendipity, because actually, just because you're not out there doesn't mean you can find different things. Like someone announcing they're pregnant could then mean in 3 months' time, they're in market for home insurance because they're nesting. still a moment of serendipity that can be data-driven. And is there a funnel or a continuum, or is it the same? Was the last thing I wrote. So.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. Okay, panelists, come on. Your turn. My voice is going now. Your turn. Come on up. Grab a seat. Any seat. Now, while these guys are grabbing their seats, what I would like, Alison and team, can you come on up here? What I would like everyone to do, because obviously there's loads of groups, we're trying to, we need to, come on up, come on. Right, you guys need to give Alison your sheets, please. So for each group, please, one of your representatives come up and give the sheet, because it's kind of important for us. I'm just kind of conscious there are people over that side of the room, so the stage is probably the easiest equidistant point at which we can collect everything. Come on, I know there's been some good thinking, it's important we get it out. Wow, this is so collaborative. Making my heart fill with joy.
I'm waiting for somebody else to help.
Verra had to go. Verra.
And I might take Vera's seat. She's had to go, unfortunately. Do I sit or do I stand? This is sort of slightly awkward. Okay, thank you for that. And thank you for your collaboration this evening. I appreciate it's sort of not always easy working groups. It's certainly not always easy then coming up on stage and talking about it and sharing it for the world. So I'm interested. What have you guys taken out of this evening? So who wants to proffer a point of view? So we came into this blind, and here we are now sitting on the stage. I mean, what are the sort of thoughts that have struck you as kind of interesting so far? Actually, you've got microphones already, haven't you?
Okay, yeah. I guess for me, I think one of the sort of themes that's come out is, to target, not to target, the type of target that you have. It really depends on the business question you're trying to answer. Like, what is it you're trying to do? And I think that then begins to define the question of should it be narrow, should it be wide? I think the answer to that question is, well, it depends, and it depends on what kind of business challenge you're trying to solve. That's one of the big takeouts for me. And I think a lot of my clients are obsessed with having a single segmentation or view of their sort of customer base. And actually, I think, what's the actual, what do you need this lens to put on your customer base? What is it you're trying to get them to do? So actually, maybe moving towards segments or target audiences, depending on the particular business challenge you're trying to solve, is the way forward.
I think one of the things that I heard a lot is that what makes great communications is a narrow understanding of who you're trying to communicate with, but that's not the audience that you want to communicate to. So a couple of you have mentioned that there is a kind of audience for your creative brief, but then there is a communication strategy audience that may be far bigger. And speaking as now a client on the dark side, thank you, Dom, is that we're interested in the latter. But actually, what makes great communications is more likely to be the former, I suspect.
I don't know whether I agree. I think a lot of the time, if you speak to great creative people, they want to do something big and famous, and so they are looking for what is a universal truth about people. And there are a lot of universal truths about people and what make them tick. And I just don't think we should forget that, because having spent a year not doing this kind of stuff, I'm still a big believer. And we talked about biscuits. McVitie's was one of my clients, and that was all about being the most famous biscuit out there. Nothing more complicated than that. And all we kind of went was, it's mainly women who buy. Women like cat videos, and they like a little bit of escapism. That equals cat videos, and biscuits equal escapism equals cat videos. Let's just do the cutest animal shit we can do. Woo! And it wasn't a lot more complicated than that, actually. And if we'd wanged on about really deep targeting, I'm not sure we'd have got to anywhere better than cat videos.
Can I just come in on that? Sorry, because spent about a year researching biscuits. And then I think our debrief went to you guys, and you won the pitch. And so it's nice to know you. Nice to know you read it. But I would argue that. It's very, and maybe it was as simple as women like cat videos, but our insight in that one...
It's a good insight.
Our insight in that one is actually, this sort of ubiquity of biscuits everyone knows about, sort of McVitie's biscuit, actually allows you to sort of say things with them and communicate with them in a way that you couldn't do with other things. And so that idea of a biscuit as something that says something was that, and then actually these different biscuits have these different sort of moments and occasions. That was kind of
what... And I do think we then did go on and spend a lot of time figuring out which biscuit was which animal.
Which animal, yeah.
Which was obviously great fun for all of us. But that sort of insight of really, what was the breakthrough was going, we don't need to talk about taste. Everybody knows what a digestive tastes like. Everybody knows, in the UK anyway, what a Jaffa cake tastes like. So let's not bother to talk about that. Let's just do something that talks about how they feel and makes it super famous. And that is really liberating, because then you're suddenly, Yeah.
I think I'd echo that. I mean, I think sometimes I think target audiences, particularly from a kind of a brand advertiser point of view, it's a sort of thing which people spend an awful lot of time wrangling over to kind of avoid having to wrangle over harder things, like what is a really great idea that's going to make us famous. In a similar way to how I think insight often gets overplayed, or rather is emphasised over and above having a great creative idea, which is a different thing. Because if you think about something like Specsavers, the fact that you can't see very well when you've not got your glasses isn't an amazing insight. That you'd never sell out on the basis of, here's our insight, do you want us to make an advertising campaign on it? But should have gone to Specsavers is a fantastic creative idea, which produces brilliant work. Same thing for Snickers, you want you when you're hungry.
Yeah.
These aren't things that are premised on some incredibly narrow conception of what a particular audience might understand as being meaningful to them. They're very broad. And in the right hands, in the right team's hands, they can make fantastic work. But they're not something that necessarily falls out of someone's mouth in a focus group, or is something that a marketeer is going to have at their disposal by means of how they've segmented the market.
So it's hopefully not an entirely unfair question, but so I've asked the guys here, the audience, to sort of, what would be the one thing you should do differently when you go back to the agency or the place that you're working. What one bit of advice would you how would you answer the question? What's the one bit of advice you'd give these fine folk as to up the game when it comes to thinking about audiences and targeting or not targeting, as the case may be, as it were? What would be the one thing that you just think, this is the thing you should be thinking about or doing?
I mean, I do think I am always kind of shocked. I guess I grew up in a world where it was still a full-service world, and I spent time in a media department as well as a strategy department, and I did learn about TGI, and I did do back of fag packet. If we reach this audience, that's that many people, and let's go for that. So I do think that is massively important, and I kind of think partly because of the separation of media and creative, we've sort of forgotten to do that as planners and creative agencies. So I do think the numbers count, but then you do that, you forget about it, and you figure out, okay, what can I be famous for? What can I be the reference point for? And that, I think, is a really exciting brief for creative teams. What am I going to be the mental shortcut for? And a lot of that time, that does play back to, if you're not careful and if you're crass, stereotypes. But if you're smart, that is what you want to nail. Be the reference point for something.
Okay.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I'd say the biggest thing you could do in an agency is to make the brand you're working on famous for the biggest need in that category. If you can do that, that's the biggest thing you could do for any client.
I'm going to agree again. I think for my man, there's a challenge of what's going to produce the best work, and there's how you're going to convince people to go and buy it. And hopefully you'll have got this by now, but just numbers do convince you to buy it, and in a way that fluff, which can be often seen as fluff, doesn't. So, whilst actual working on that kind of qualitative side of things, I think, does often generate the best ideas. If you want to make sure that has traction, you've got to go back to the numbers, and you've got to say it's going to affect this many people in this way, and it's going to generate that level of increased penetration or frequency or whatever your objective might be. And if you don't do that, the chances are you're going to have a tough sell.
I mean, who should do that? Should that be the creative agency or media agency or a combination? As a client, what's your take on that?
I think media agencies have got an inbuilt advantage because they often have more data at their disposal. But to Lucy's point of view, even back in the day of TGI, you don't need to be a data scientist to at least have some grasp of what these numbers are. Yeah. I mean, anybody that starts doing some back of fag calculations and then says, I've got this narrowly defined audience here, and I need to go from 1% share to 90% share in a week if I'm going to hit your sales objectives. Surely that should set a few alarm bells going that maybe you're barking up the wrong tree there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think my final thought on it is, we can sort of conceive of groups and types of people, and you mentioned sort of the stereotypical group and Carol with her glass of Prosecco. As humans, we can imagine other groups of humans, but actually, one of the things listening to everyone tonight, and Carolina sort of picked up on this, the commonalities that very, very different on the surface, superficially different types of people might actually share. For example, we're working on a project at the moment looking at sort of loyalty to a digital platform. What is it that keeps someone paying monthly for that subscription? Well, there's 4 or 5 really important things to know about what makes someone loyal to that platform, and that spans every demographic, every sort of gender, every kind of possible thing you might see at a human level. There's actually 5 common things you really need to know, and that's your group. It defies any other kind of human way of seeing that group, but that's a really important group to know, and then you can start to do things with that group. So it's like I guess using data to get at what an actual group or behaviour might be that's very different to what we might see as a human thing on the surface, but also trying to think of that human way you reach a target as well has to be in there at some point, I think. Great question though.
So I'm going to open it up a little bit to the floor, to you guys. Who's got some questions?
Somebody over there.
Okay, here we go. I'm loving these microphones as well. They feel really old school.
We've got one you can throw.
They're big, aren't they?
Nick, go on.
Like a local radio DJ.
Yeah.
In more ways than. There's a lot being made of the fact that Brexit came as a bit of a shock, and it maybe suggests that we all live in a bit of a bubble, a bit of an echo chamber. Isn't there a danger if we don't prescribe an audience that we end up just writing stuff for people like us, and we therefore just end up kind of existing in this little echo chamber and forget about what real people are like?
Yes and no. I think that is about. I think there's 2 things. It's weird. We have a little cottage down in the countryside, and I'd spent the last couple of weekends down there pre-Brexit and chatted to the guys who ran the cafe, and there was this big discussion in the cafe, and it was fucking clear there was going to be Brexit when you had a kind of basic conversation. You're like, oh, okay. I don't know that it takes a huge amount just to get out of your bubble. I remember as a planner, and this is, again, going back, when I joined at the same time as another bloke planner. He got put on beer and crisps, and I got put on household cleaners and cleansers. And if anyone knows me at all, they will know that I have no fucking idea about cleaning products at all. And you have to have a basic sense of empathy. And I don't think, I just don't think you're exercising your empathy enough if you're getting trapped in your filter bubble. For sure. I spent a bunch of time doing 90 focus groups a year in the height of the Meat and Livestock Commission BSE crisis. So yes, I was exposed to a load of people who didn't think the way I did, but fundamentally it's about an exercise in empathy, and if you're not good at that as a planner, well, you've got a problem.
I think, if you're not, I mean, I don't know whether empathy is a skill or a quality that people have, but you need that as a planner. And watch the news, and you get an idea of what people are thinking. And I think I think what you're talking about, there's a bit of something that I don't know whether it's kind of identity politics or this sort of trend, but there's an idea somehow that goes around that somehow if you're not that person, you can't imagine what that other person might feel like. And I don't think that's true. I think people have imagination. People can put themselves in other people's shoes. Maybe some people better than others. But it's important as a planner to be able to do that and to try and do that and to be the voice of that person that maybe doesn't think like you. When you are faced with some creative work that feels very bubbly, because for sure there's people are in bubbles, but you need to one of the things you can bring that's most valuable as a planner is that sense of what might be going on outside of that bubble and bring that in.
My sort of take on that is that the people that voted for Brexit, they're not a group. Everyone voted for very different personal reasons, and actually, again, if you found the sort of common threads or themes, fears, motivations of why you might vote that way, you could have probably come up with that. But I think it's one of those sort of human things. You think, well, we put them in a group of I'm sure people here voted for that too, and I think that's one of the risky things of targeting. Actually, is when you put that label on, suddenly all the sort of projections and stereotypes then come along with it. I mean, I'm a cyclist. I spend a lot of time sort of cycling around in London, but actually, as a sort of transport planner for London, it's an extremely unuseful term. Because actually I'm also a pedestrian and I'm also a motorist and I'm also a public transport user. And actually, you need to think of me as a human that needs to get around this town and then think about how I need to make those journeys. If you think about cyclists or think about motorists, you're sort of doomed to fail.
Doomed to fail. So, I love the idea of exercising empathy. And is there a muscle, an empathy muscle? You could,
Sarah Carter is one of the smartest planners I've ever worked with, who's at Adam and Eve. She always used to make an effort to read some random, something random that she would never know, a magazine, something, because you always fall in love with it in some weird kind of way. Any particular audience I've been marketing to, I have to fall in love with them.
Be unnormal. So any more questions before we wrap up? I'm conscious it's just gone 8 and probably you've got things to do. If anyone's dying to ask a question, ask for now. Speak now, ever. Hold your speed. Champy. Where are we going? Which way? James.
Hello. A lot of the conversation this evening has been talking about target audiences and brands, and back in the day it was quite easy for a brand to have relatively easy for a brand to have a fairly direct conversation with a target audience, either through direct or through broadcast channels, and it was brand to audience. And now the picture's a bit different because you've got digital and social and people talking to other people, and brands might have a part to play in that conversation. So, wide open question. So what do you think have been the big impacts of that we should watch out for?
Well, one thing that I think I've noticed is that there is a general shift amongst brand owners in that they think of themselves less as a product and more as a service, no matter what it is that you're selling. And often that service may not actually involve any transfer of money for months and years, but certainly, people are thinking about, well, what are the experiences and what are the utilities that we can provide people so that we can at least have some kind of relationship with you and think like a service provider of any kind, rather than just we make things and sell things. And I can see that change happening across all kinds of businesses. My own business we're trying to do the same thing with varied success, I might add. But that is a challenge for people who have grown up in big, even like big consumer goods manufacturers who just make things and sell things. How do you suddenly start thinking of a service and start thinking that you're going to have some kind of relationship with somebody for years, often?
I think there's an interesting thing as well with you're right. It's kind of easier for brands to communicate more directly with people than ever before, and be more targeted, and be more precise, and be more efficient. And but although that is valuable and very useful for some brands some of the time, there's a kind of seductive side to that, which is that is therefore, because it's useful some of the time, it's useful all of the time. And you don't need to do that job of having the waste, which enables you to be famous and add that extra value and develop that equity over a longer time period. So I think there's the opportunities of brands are incredible now, and small brands can be successful in a way they probably couldn't be successful in the past. And the internet has done lots of incredible things with regards to distribution and communication more generally. But I think you need to be careful with what you're doing and what you see as your real engine for growth as a brand, because it's not necessarily just about having even more of those, even more direct conversations.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think it is an and world, isn't it, that we live in. You want to absolutely be able to have those that Verra talked about, the in-market, very precise, targeted things. And actually, that is the bit that's boomed. That's the bit that I think, suddenly we can all do really well. But interestingly, creating the fame and those shared things is the bit that's actually now a load harder than it was, And so, in a way, that has its scarcity, and that is, I think, a much more challenging thing. But potentially, if you can get that right, an incredibly valuable thing. But I do think it's a lot tougher than it was.
For a creative hotshot, you might. Anyway, thank you very much this evening. Thank you for coming. Hope it's been interesting and stimulating, and hopefully even useful. Give us a big hand to our panelists. Brilliant. And before you all run out, we're hosting a new kind of event. In addition to Noisy Thinking, it's going to be called Thinking Round Corners. There's some stuff up on the APG site about it. It's going to be fun and furious, a combination of thinking round corners, really. And you should all discover more about it there. It's on the 17th of May. There are still a couple of tickets left. Go and grab them, I suggest, because it's going to be a lot of fun. So over to you. Just feel free to have a drink or two. See you soon.